this right here looks like a naked human-like footprint. I don't know how it's gonna turn up on there, but this looks like a heel. It kind of narrows out here, and it looks like toes. I mean, if this is from a Bigfoot, it's the first track I've ever found. And it's a shame it's in the moss, because it'd be nice to try and cast one. But it is definitely an impression. See anything else?
Just the bear tracks.
Probably put it pretty high up. Perfect.
Well, at the time, I didn't really know. I didn't know what was happening. I was suspecting, and then, like you said, when the second rock was thrown, I said to my friend, "That this is no bear. Are you still skeptical on the Bigfoot thing?" Because I was thinking it has to be that, like, because of the size of the rocks. A lot of people are driving by Port Alberni, and people have seen one cross the road, and freak out. It's like, this thing has great big strides, and people are not used to that, right? And seeing something so big, and like lots of them are big and wide, and have huge strides and big feet,
The subject of Sasquatch has the unique ability to captivate people and plant the seed for what is most likely to be a lifelong interest or even an obsession. There's something magnetic about it. It's a mystery that connects those who explore it with the natural world, and also the strong possibility that somewhere out there in the forests of North America is a long-lost relative of humans so genetically close to us that, odds are, its DNA would be nearly indistinguishable from our own. Thousands of people have reported living through experiences where they've come face to face with these bizarre hair-covered beings. There's a substantial amount of encounters that happen every year. Certainly enough to warrant investigations and expeditions into the wilderness in search of these creatures. This is where I come in. That's me, Justin Chernopesky, filmmaker, outdoor enthusiast, and all-around curious dude who is always seeking answers to all the questions about the unknown. For me, the ultimate question has always been, does Sasquatch actually exist? Is it actually feasible that the wilds of the Pacific Northwest could support such a creature? How can these massive beings remain hidden for so long? The whole mystery just never made much sense to me. Within the subject of Sasquatch are hundreds upon hundreds of other questions, and to be quite honest, there's not many answers. And that's exactly why I'm doing this, to set out into nature and to search for those answers. As the title says, this is my search for Sasquatch. So this is the Bigfoot Museum in Harrison Hot Springs. It's pretty small, but they've crammed a lot of information into this little area. Lots of stuff about Patterson and a lot of historical sightings like Ruby Creek. And a lot of information about the Four Horsemen. So Renee DeHinden, Peter Byrne, John Green, Grover Krantz. It's very interesting, and it's really cool to see these track casts, even though some of them are replicas. It's cool to have a close-up look at them to see how impressive they really are. This footage is from more recent times, but my Sasquatch journey started years ago back in 2013, when a crazy idea was tossed my way from a friend thinking it would be such a fun idea to delve into the world of Sasquatch and create a documentary film about it. And I thought to myself, absolutely. And the rest is history. I scavenged together whatever video equipment I could and the few poorly developed skills I had in my repertoire, and off I went, in search of the legendary North American Wildman. Coincidentally, not long before the idea for this film came my way, my dad had actually called me one night full of excitement and enthusiasm, and with the incredible claim that he himself, and in the company of a friend, had a startling experience with Sasquatch deep in the mountains of Vancouver Island. I needed to interview him immediately, and I couldn't think of a more perfect start to this wild adventure.
Well, it's been quite a few years ago, actually. I started seeing documentaries on Bigfoot and was kind of a skeptic, and was actually quite a bit of a skeptic. And then in the recent years, I moved out to Vancouver Island, and there was a lot of sightings out there, and I just studied more on it. And it was interesting because it was right there where I live. Well, when I was living on Vancouver Island, I became good friends with a friend of mine that I met up there. And we naturally did a lot of fishing because we had that in common. And we went to all kinds of lakes. And he was into fishing a lot more than I was. And he wanted to go and explore lakes up in the mountains. So he went to the fishing store and got maps of old logging roads on all these little lakes. And there was one particular lake that we did go to. We found. I don't know how he found it because it's off a logging road and really grew a lot of growth in there. So we went there, I would say, and it was a very small lake, beautiful mountains all around, and it's you could see right to the bottom because it's shallow. You can see the fish. It was just amazing. And we probably went there, I would say, about 4 or 5 times, and then the 6th time, I would say, we drive up there and back the truck up and unload the little rubber dinghy that we were fishing on. And then all of a sudden this huge rock comes something like a really big rock starts coming down kind of a gravel slope and hitting trees as it's coming down, and it totally shocked us. So my friend, he's shakes his head and he goes, something big must have threw this rock down. or rolled it over this cliff or something. And he's a total skeptic on Bigfoot also. And then so we get fishing on the lake, and shortly, like, we're fishing for 10 minutes, 15 maybe, and lo and behold, another rock. But this was at, right at the lake. And he was, the way the skiff was, the boat was facing, I was in just perfect line with this. And he was, because I was on the back of the boat and he was on the front, so he was facing towards me. And so what I seen is a great big rock, again, thrown against a big spruce tree. And it bent it right down, and then it flipped and landed in the water and made a huge splash. It was like, oh boy. And that time my friend looked over and it's like, what is that, And that again was another big rock, and we're not that far away. And this is like, so this is like within 15 minutes. So I said to my buddy, I said, oh, you don't believe in Bigfoot yet, do you? He goes, what was that? He was just blown away by, because it's not a bear, obviously. We're the only ones in there. There's only one road in. And I don't believe a human could throw a rock that size up 10, 12 feet up to the spruce tree. That's probably roughly, I would say, the distance where it hit the tree. I was aiming, my head was, facing that direction. And I just first seen the tree go now. It was probably about a 16-foot spruce tree, at least. It would take quite a rock to fling that, because the base of this spruce tree is, it was probably 8 or 9 inches, I would say. I didn't think they had that much spring to them, but they sure do. I was really surprised how good of aim somebody had to get this thing right in the middle of the tree until it got to that point to, tip off this tree, and so it has to be a big rock to take a tree down like that. And then the tree went like this. It was, wow. It wasn't just a little rock like this thrown. It was a big rock, and it took something big to throw a rock like that. So I told my friend, after the rock was thrown by the water on that tree, I told him, let's go a bit closer and see if we can see what did this. And he wouldn't go. He didn't want to go any closer. So we ended up fishing on one side of the lake instead of going all the way around like we usually did. We were pretty scared after that a bit. We were cautious, and I was we were there for probably 2 or 3 hours, and I was constantly looking around in the bush and in the openings up on that mountain ridge, but never seen anything.
Hearing about my dad's encounter in person was fascinating. It's one thing to hear an encounter over the phone or to read about one online, but when you're actually sitting with someone in person and they're opening up to you about a life-changing Sasquatch experience they've had, it gives you a greater sense of what actually went down and how the experiencer felt during and after the event. To be honest, it didn't give me any more confidence in my mission. It definitely made me more apprehensive and nervous. What was I going to encounter? What if this thing or things are still out there at Henry Lake? Will I even be safe? I didn't know the answers to any of these questions, but regardless, I moseyed on down to Vancouver Island to find out. A journey of over 2,000 kilometers from where I interviewed my dad. This was to be my greatest adventure yet, and ultimately a life-changing one. These were my first steps into the world of Bigfoot. After finally getting to the island, I took advantage of visiting one of the most admired and well-respected researchers in the world of Sasquatch, the late Dr. John Bindernagel. I needed more information about the creature, and I wanted to know truly what exactly it was I was looking for. This was by far the best way to go about it, and to my luck, he had actually responded to my email inquiries and graced me with an invite to his home. This was going to be awesome.
I follow up reports, when some come to my attention, and I follow up, and it's always interesting to me as a biologist. Okay, people claim to have seen a Sasquatch, and I don't doubt people the way some others. I mean, it usually takes them quite a while to come forward and say, you won't believe this, but this is what I saw. And I'm saying, well, actually, I've heard enough reports and, seen enough drawings and things that I probably do believe it. But I'm interested in seeing where you saw it. And then I try to figure out, why would it be there? Is it a great wildlife area? Is it a wetland or a seashore with maybe a clam beach or something like that, or a salmon stream? Or is it just sort of normal second growth conifer forest, which we have so much of around here, coniferous forest? In which case, maybe it's just passing through. But then there's these reports that, it's been carrying a deer, or it's been digging shellfish. And now those are really interesting, because we actually we have started building a bit of an ecological profile, how it behaves, what it eats. And the behavior reports are so interesting. When people report stone throwing and loud branch breaking, the wood knocks, that sort of thing. I think, okay, there's some consistency here. We're getting a sense of how this animal tries to intimidate people, sometimes maybe try to repel them from an area, and a bit about what it eats and how it lives. There's the tradition of the Sasquatch in Aboriginal culture, at Zunaqua, the wild woman of the woods, which so frequently is dismissed as supernatural or mythical, in the sense of exclusively mythical, rather than saying, okay, it occurs in myth. Maybe there's a kernel of truth to that myth that warrants some investigation. And then there's lots of what I call historical accounts, and they go back into the 1800s, which have languished, so the early historical accounts, okay, it was described as a monster, and people didn't know what to do. And sure, cataloging is a problem, it seems to be a primate, which includes both apes and humans. And I used to be, I wouldn't say insistent on it being an upright great ape, but I thought that was a really good hypothesis. But that seems to repel a lot of investigators who say, oh, no, this is no ape, this is definitely human. Well, rather than get bogged down in that distinction at this point, I like to just say, well, it's a primate, which includes everything, or even an anthropoid, that sort of thing, apes and humans, something like that. We've got some really good eyewitness drawings that have been provided for us, and a lot of them are big adult males, the wide shoulders, the really deep chest. They all seem to have the long arms. That's a pretty consistent thing. The very thick neck, sometimes a somewhat pointed head. Some are described as females because breasts are seen, or because it's been seen carrying an infant. Others seem to be young adults or sub-adults, and these are much more human-like in their proportions, but still usually that thick neck and the long arms. But, and then, we actually have, descriptions of the face, a very wide mouth, thin lips, a very wide upper lip. A tendency, and there's a little controversy on the nose, whether it's the human type nose with downward facing nostrils or more of a flat gorilla-like nose, and we seem to hear both. Eyes seem to be deep set, brow ridges sometimes described, a receding forehead rather than a sharp one like ours, a rounded jaw rather than the sharp jaw of modern humans. So there's a lot of detail. And then the hair covering, usually complete hair covering, usually dark, but often reddish brown. in primates, you get all this variation, and just like in humans, you get a lot of variation. You know, genuine races in the physical sense. You know, it's a fact with different anatomical characteristics, and I think of Jane Goodall's work on chimpanzees. She could recognize individuals and they varied a lot. That's it. We're simply maybe talking about a range in like facial features.
There's no doubt about it. British Columbia is the perfect place to make an attempt at locating one of these creatures. The forests are lush and full of life and could certainly support a small population of them. The dense rainforest would actually make it relatively easy for a massive bipedal ape-like creature to remain hidden and undiscovered. Some areas of the island are truly impenetrable. I wonder, maybe somewhere out there is a little tucked away haven somewhere in the mountains that Sasquatch calls home. Maybe it never leaves, maybe it never has to, but maybe it gets curious about its more technologically advanced cousin, humans. And maybe it ventures out periodically to investigate us the same way that we're investigating it. Who knows for sure? One thing's for certain though, it was time to hit the back roads and get to Henry Lake.
So I finally found the turnoff for Henry Lake, and it is pouring out. I actually drove right by it and had to turn around, but there's no signs to it. I mean, you know, in the middle of nowhere. I'm just glad to be at this point, so I'm gonna head up the road. Hopefully it's not washed out anywhere, but it looks like it could get pretty bad. Oh God. Yeah, this is not a good idea. The windows are fogging up really good. This side of the road is just a sheer cliff. It's just a drop off. Jesus. So I just stopped here because my engine was heating up quite a bit, and so I checked on that, and then I noticed that this stick is in this tree right here. Like, I don't know, it's too big to have fallen from this. Look at. Well, now I just picked it up, but like it was just sitting there, like something put it there. I don't know if it's supposed to mark anything, but it is my first find, you know. Maybe it is from a Bigfoot. Whatever it was, it's kind of bizarre. Because if you look at the branches up there, they are a lot smaller. And if they would have fallen, you know, they would look a lot different than that. And they would have needles on them. And this looks like it's from a totally different tree. Yeah, very weird. Anyways, I'm going to move on to the lake. Maybe I should take a photograph of that, actually. That's a good call. So, this is my shelter, and I guess I'll, set up my equipment inside there, and that's where I'll hang out. Mostly, I'm still gonna sleep in the truck because I don't feel safe. It's pretty freaking cold out, and the wind's starting to pick up, and so sometimes the rain lets up a bit, but I don't think it's gonna stop. I don't think it's gonna stop at all. Not hearing anything back. Looks like there's something draining into the lake there. Can't really. Oh yeah, there's a little river, a little creek, or a spring or something. Ugh. I have to find a way to get over there through the bush and along the shore over here, because that's where the rocks were thrown. Well, maybe, I guess one must have come down here or here and then stopped. And then the other one was thrown out and hit one of those trees, bent it over, and it plopped in the water, so. But if you look closely, you can see, there's a lot of rock up there, and it looks kind of loose, so, I don't see why it couldn't have just been a rock falling. But this does look like where a Bigfoot would live. This looks like a really prime area. Sometimes I just stop and listen and look, because you never know. Something could be watching me right now.
After getting myself more or less settled into my camp, I thought it'd be a good idea to go for a little walk and get a better sense of the area. The weather wasn't letting up much, and it was making documenting this experience much more difficult than it would normally be if conditions were more favorable. I also took this opportunity to look for locations that would be good to set up infrared trail cameras in hopes of maybe capturing a shot of a Sasquatch creature at night, or for when I'm just in camp paying attention to other things. Obviously, while exploring the area, I kept my eyes open for the best type of evidence left behind by Sasquatch: footprints.
We were lucky to find tracks, good tracks, back in 1987, and that's the best. Then other people have found tracks and cast them, and we have some very nice examples of that right here on Vancouver Island and elsewhere. And for me as a biologist, the track casts are the best of evidence. I mean, we need to pull it all together, and say, okay, we have the description, and we've had descriptions of the feet. And it's sometimes described as a broad foot. Well, and that's a sort of a consistent feature, that the Sasquatch foot isn't just an expanded version of the human foot, but it tends to be a very broad foot, broader proportionally than the human.
There are many things to look out for while out in the forest looking for Sasquatch. Aside from the footprints, other great pieces of evidence that one might come across are broken trees, saplings, and branches where a creature might have moved through or manipulated in a specific way with its hands for whatever reason. Hair samples are excellent pieces of evidence because, to put it into perspective, you are actually discovering and hopefully gathering an actual piece of the creature which would contain its DNA. And then there's scat. the waste matter of Sasquatch. The good thing about scat is that a person can train themselves to be able to identify the scat of pretty much any animal out in the forest. So when they come across scat that looks unusual, they could go through their list of known culprits based on the scat's physical appearance and start narrowing down that list of culprits until there's no other known animals left, leaving the Sasquatch as the likely suspect. One should constantly be on the lookout for any of these evidence examples.
Nice to have a fire going tonight, but everything's so wet, all the trees are so wet that I think it'd be impossible to start. I keep thinking I hear like voices. I can't tell. So right now I've just been spending the last little while kind of preparing my truck for a quick getaway, you know, if it comes down to that. I'm going to be throwing everything back inside, minus the tent and my tarps, and I think I should be good. I'll have to turn on my one trail cam, you know, to see if anything comes by my camp at night. It is getting dark fast. So, what I'm going to do now is just try and make some noise. One of the things that the Bigfoot are supposed to do to communicate is to, you know, they'll either do wood knocks or they'll smash rocks together, kind of make like a banging sound. So I'm going to try to do that, and I'll see if anything responds. Not really doing too much. They're probably just looking down at me thinking, you know, what an idiot. It's getting pretty scary out. It stopped raining. That's good. That makes me happy. A lot of people think that the Sasquatch is a nocturnal animal, and I guess the theory behind that is because a lot of the encounters that people have had, they've had kind of reddish orange eyes, and it was at night. So, you know, like your pet cat, when you see it hiding in the dark, it's got kind of a glow to its eyes. Well, apparently it's the same thing with Sasquatch. Now, right now I'm just kind of scanning the trees and the ridge for any movement, because, you know, I think they might start coming out if they're here.
So many Sasquatch reports seem to be single individuals, especially males. There's a few reports of small groups, a female with young, occasionally a larger group. It doesn't seem to have the social structure of like troops, like chimpanzees or bands. So, and the model, if it works, and I think it's the best model we have, is the orangutan. We have a male and female together in what they call a consortship for mating. And then the male goes off as a solitary individual again, and the female and young remain together. And I think that's might be the sort of situation we have here. I mean, it'd be nice, to be at the point where we could talk about that, because, and I don't want to speculate, because people say, well, it comes to Sasquatch, it's all speculation. No, it isn't. We actually know a great deal, but there's a temptation to sometimes speculate when we shouldn't. But I mean, that's a really fertile area for investigation, I think.
I've also heard that in a Sasquatch family, there will be usually one male and multiple females, like 3 or 4 females, and they'll breed together, and have children. And yeah, I guess that's usually the family dynamic. But who knows for sure? It could just be a bunch of nonsense. I just heard something in the bushes back there.
It seems that Sasquatches do occur they're more active at night. They seem to be very active at night, but then there's lots of daytime sightings as well. So that's another good one. But I have a colleague, Henry Fehrenbach, and he made a good point that so many Sasquatches are seen in the headlights of cars. And since with a car, we're really illuminating a very small portion of the environment, that it suggests they're traveling quite a lot at night. I think sometimes Sasquatches make mistakes, and they're seen, in an open field or crossing a highway. And, I don't think we need to jump to the conclusion that, this highway is good habitat because that's where it was seen. No, it was made a mistake. But it would be interesting when that happens is to look for good habitat nearby. There's a really strong correlation with water, creeks, rivers, wetlands, and especially ocean shores. The coast of BC, and this is what distresses me here in British Columbia, that my professional biologist colleagues will not take it seriously when here in British Columbia, we probably have the best Sasquatch habitat. The thinking in biology is that a lot of mammals have a home range, and you can have overlapping home ranges. And part of that home range might be defended as a territory. And a territory can be movable. The territory might be based on a female with a young being defended by that female or by a male. And when the young is more fully grown or they move off, that's no longer defended. Or it might be a food source. And yeah, there is this indication that there is maybe territoriality, especially when Aboriginal people talk about at certain clam beaches, they get stones thrown at them from the adjacent shoreline. And like here on the BC, parts of the BC coast in Kwakwaka'wakw country, they say, well, this is Bukwas or Zunaqua, and they know what it is, and they say, okay, we should leave, and at least that's the way it used to be anyway.
Vancouver Island is obviously surrounded by ocean shores, which are more often than not excellent sources of food for whatever creatures exist on the land. For a creature such as Sasquatch, it would be highly probable that they spend significant amounts of time scouring the beaches under the cover of darkness in search of shellfish and other food items. A creature of such stature would need a high-calorie diet, and the beaches provide a readily available source for these calories.
There's an incredible amount of shellfish that are broken open, some aren't broken open, but it is a perfect food source for anything with the dexterity and the creativity to get it open. So, things like people or Bigfoot or something like an otter. But it almost looks like rocks, there's so many of them, but it's actually shells.
A lot of experiences people do have are vocal sounds and growls, and tree breaking too. There's people that been camping in campers and in cabins, and rocks have been thrown at the roof, and a lot of people are driving by Port Alberni, and people have seen one cross the road and freak out. It's like this thing has great big strides, and people are not used to that, right? And seeing something so big, and like lots of them are big. One of the biggest things years ago that fascinated me the most was the size of these things. 6 to 8, 900 pounds. That's huge. And that's, it's not the big feet. It's the size of their bodies that's massive. And they walk on 2 legs. That's the biggest thing that fascinated me. I don't think they're out to kill us, unless we threaten them, corner them, threaten them, injure one of them. Then they have it out for, humans. But I would worry more about black bears surprising a bear with cubs, and mountain lions. Pay attention. Keep your keys in the vehicle. Stay close to your vehicle at nighttime.
My dad's experience happened more inland, but Sasquatch are, according to eyewitness testimony, highly mobile creatures. They move around with relative ease throughout the landscape, and on top of that, Henry Lake is not terribly far from these abundant coastal waters, certainly within the home range of a group of Sasquatch. The nights out at Henry Lake were some of the longest I've ever experienced. It was quite honestly the spookiest place I'd ever camped in, and to do it alone added so much more to the eerie atmosphere. If something happened here, something bad, it would be a long time before anyone else would even know about it. Despite having a really good tent, I opted each night to sleep in the driver's seat of my vehicle. I wasn't taking any chances. Each morning I would do a lap of the lake to see if there was anything new that might have turned up overnight, such as footprints or any other type of trace evidence. It was also a great way to warm up and get the blood flowing. The mornings here at Henry Lake were horribly cold.
This is the first time I've seen blue sky over this lake. What I'm gonna do this morning is walk around that road. That road goes around the whole lake, so I'm gonna walk along there and see if I can find any tracks. Some people have found tracks that are like 20 inches long. That is huge. That is a huge foot. So any creature with a track like that must be absolutely enormous. 900 pounds, 10 feet tall. Climbing up these hills would be absolute hell. A definite ankle twister, that's for sure. And it's like rock cliff up there. Slippery, mossy, rocky cliff. Now from up here I'm kind of looking down on the trees along the shore. Maybe I can find a mark on the tree that was hit, the one that bent over. See how high up it is if I can find it. But there are a lot of little trees down there, and it could be any one of those. I don't know. What does a guy have to do to have an experience with a Sasquatch? I don't know. What am I doing wrong? I'm just out here. Maybe it's because I'm looking for it. Because I'm looking for it that it doesn't want to show itself. And I'm trying to be as objective as I can towards the subject. Like, I'm not going to say they exist, and I'm not going to say they don't exist, because I really have no idea. And the only way I'll ever know for sure is if I see one myself. But until then, I have to be, I have to be a skeptic. I do want them to exist, and I think it's possible that they could exist, but
you know, I can't say for sure that they exist, and I don't want to say that to anybody. Mountain gorillas weren't discovered for the longest time. It was only up until, like, I don't know, the late 1800s, I think, that they discovered the mountain gorilla. And up until then, it was just stories and rumors, and nobody really believed that they existed. And then one day they were found. And the population of those mountain gorillas is very small. I bet you it's a lot smaller than what they think the Sasquatch population is. You know, maybe the place I see Sasquatch won't be here. Maybe it'll be back in Alberta. You never know. There's so many sightings in the Rocky Mountains in Alberta. I might as well have just stayed there. But the fact that my dad had an experience here, you know, that's the main reason why I came, is to investigate that. But it's proving to be more difficult than I had ever imagined.
Well, at the time, I didn't really know. I didn't know what was happening. I was suspecting, and then, like you said, when the second rock was thrown, I said to my friend, "That, you know, this is no bear. Are you still skeptic on the Bigfoot thing?" You know, because I was thinking it has to be that, like, because of the size of the rocks. But I think that it could have been a warning, and they're letting us know probably that they don't really want us there because that's their territory. It's something that doesn't happen every day when you go fishing.
Would you ever go back there?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I think we went there about 2 or 3 times after this. Yeah, I think at least 2 or 3 times. And never seen anything. Never heard anything. Nothing else happened. And because I kept my eyes open from when we turned off the highway and until we got to the lake. But you know, when you're looking for something, it doesn't seem like you can find anything.
I'm probably scaring the shit out of all those loggers. They probably think it's a Sasquatch, but it's just me. You'll get reports on the news of tree banging and rocks clacking. Sorry, but probably just me. That echoes more than I thought it would.
It's long been thought that Sasquatch use tree knocks to communicate over larger distances with each other, almost like in a Morse code kind of way. Personally, I'm not 100% sure this is an actual thing that is going on, but based on many reports documenting tree knocking and rock clacking, I thought I'd give it a whirl as my trip was coming to an end and there wasn't really anything to lose in doing so. My efforts resulted in no responses. It was, yet again, a very quiet night. After another cold sleep, I spent the morning tearing down camp and retrieving my cameras that I had set up. It was nearly time to depart Henry Lake and to continue my search elsewhere. It was weird. I thought for sure that I would experience high strangeness while out there in those remote Vancouver Island mountains. But like my dad said, when you're out looking for something, it doesn't seem like you can ever find it.
What it has changed my life, I guess, a little bit. It made me more of a believer than I was before. It's like seeing is believing, that old saying, but having rocks, these big rock things happen, I'm a believer for sure. Just because, like I said before, nothing can throw rocks like that big. No, I can't even lift one or roll one of those rocks that I've seen that were thrown. You know, it takes something very powerful. I'm glad that experience has happened to me, and I'm glad we were all right, of course, you know, that they weren't aggressive. Like I said, they could have been waiting for us at the vehicle when we got back, or one of them or something, you know, every time we went fishing, I'd be keeping my eyes open for black bears and maybe hoping to see something like a Bigfoot, and never did, but just having those 2 rock experiences was enough for me, especially after reading you know, that they do like throwing rocks and big ones. So
right now we're here in Sasquatch Provincial Park, And yes, you heard that correctly. There's a provincial park in Canada called Sasquatch Provincial Park in British Columbia. We're not too far out of Harrison Hot Springs, where the Sasquatch Museum is that we were just at earlier today. And, you know, Sasquatch Provincial Park. You can see how beautiful it is. It is a well-trafficked area, so there's lots of people that come through here. But it's called Sasquatch Provincial Park because of the vast amount of reports in this area. And, you know, the Ruby Creek incident that happened back in the 1920s happened not too far away as the crow flies from this location, a little ways southeast of here. So if you go north of here, it's Chehalis First Nations country, so you have all the reports of the First Nations women that used to get taken away. The story of Seraphine Long, where she was kidnapped by a Sasquatch when she was out carrying wood, and the Sasquatch put the tree pitch in her eyes so she couldn't open them or see where she was going. She ended up living with the Sasquatch for a long period of time. That's all, you know, in this general area. So lots of Bigfoot history, lots of crazy remote wilderness, beautiful trees, you know, lots of places for a creature like the Bigfoot to hide. The crazy thing about the wilderness out here in British Columbia on the west coast, as opposed to the forests in like Alberta and the Rocky Mountains, is that it seems to be way more lush. There's a lot of humidity and just a lot of growth everywhere, and it just seems like there's a lot more life to the forest as opposed to what we see further inland. But when you come back into these wilderness areas, you can really get a sense of how easy it would be for a creature, even a creature the size of Sasquatch, to survive. I mean, there's plenty of hiding spaces, and even right now, if you look at the forest behind me, all these massive trees, like, we're not even that far off the highway. But if you go back further, like kilometers into the mountains, it would be impossible to find a family of Sasquatch. Plenty of spaces to hide, so it's not unreasonable to think that, you know, that they wouldn't be able to stay hidden. Whenever you're walking through the forest here, you do find these slugs. They seem to be all over the forest floor. You can see one right here, and they just kind of crawl along and look for things to eat. They are very slimy, and they almost kind of look like turds. In fact, I think they eat turds, so it's probably not a good idea to be holding this with my bare hands, but I'll have to wash them later. You can see there's lots of slime on the palm of my hand now. In this spot in particular, there's apparently over 250 species of moss that live in this forest, which is absolutely insane. You can see it growing on this deadfall here. And to the average person, to people like me, it all looks the same. But I guess, you know, there is that much variety. 250 species? That's pretty crazy. And then there's some that are specific to this exact area. There's apparently one species that only grows here and in Scotland. Very strange.
Though the coastal areas of British Columbia are excellent habitat for a creature such as Sasquatch, with dense, lush foliage making great locations to hide out in, and so many abundant sources of food to sustain itself, it was time to get off the island and make my way back home. But the adventure was not over yet. It was time to take what I had learned on the island and apply it to my next expedition. I didn't want to do it alone though. It was time to assemble a team and head out into another well-known Bigfoot hotspot, Nordegg, Alberta.
My name is Ty Boyko from Edmonton, Alberta. Justin invited me along on this expedition to help shoot some footage. Bit of a skeptic, but hopefully we see some neat things and have an open mind, so maybe we'll catch Bigfoot.
My name's Curtis Matwishin. I work with Justin. I do forestry as well. I'm from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. As you can see, I do quite a bit of photography, so don't really know what I believe when it comes to Bigfoot, but if he is out there, I'd definitely love to be the one to get a picture of him, so see what we can see this weekend.
Hi there, my name's Jared Matwishin. I'm a forestry worker and outdoor enthusiast from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. I guess I could say my interest in Bigfoot research really started after having my own experience while working in a remote area of northern Saskatchewan of coming across a series of the typical large, bare, human-shaped foot. So I hope to find something similar while we're on this expedition out here this year.
Nordegg, Alberta has a long history of substantial Sasquatch encounters, many of which are regarded as classic cases amongst the Bigfoot community. Conveniently, Nordegg is also just a morning's drive from my home, making it a perfect location to establish as a long-term research area. I assembled a team of close friends to accompany me on this expedition. It's also worth noting that each of them were experienced forestry workers with a genuine curiosity towards the subject of Sasquatch. In contrast to my Henry Lake trip, it didn't take long before weird things started to happen. We had arrived at the expedition location later in the evening, but at around midnight we were all just sitting around the campfire hanging out, not really thinking about making the film or any of the shooting we were going to be doing the next day, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we were all startled to hear a loud crack and what sounded like a small tree falling over very close to our camp area, but just out of sight and a little ways into the trees. This set the tone for the rest of the expedition. We immediately grabbed the cameras and wandered off into the darkness in search of whatever caused this disturbance. Lesson learned? Always have your cameras rolling.
What's that? Just checking it out. Huh.
Yeah, I got something reflecting back at me over there.
You do?
Yeah.
Where? You there?
I don't know if it's like eyes, but yeah, there's something reflecting.
Is it up on the hill? Careful.
Yeah, it's to our left.
Where? Is it moving? Come with me. Yeah. I know. You're good. So it sounded like branches snapping, eh?
It was something,
got
moving.
pushed or fell over.
Could have been a rock, could have been a log, could have been something moving something.
Thumb would be right there.
Yeah,
There's 6.
there's 6 fingers there.
That's weird. Just walking up to our car
It
here.
was parked. It'd be that side. That's the forest side.
Yeah,
This was the side to the
forest.
woods, yeah.
Yeah, we were walking up to the car here. I was just about to get some more stuff before we head out, and we noticed a few of these kind of strange-looking handprints, like up to my hand. You can see what would be the palm, or what looks like the palm, is a little bit lower. So it almost looks as though something maybe put a hand on here and then peered in.
That bottom part just looks weird, like more fingers.
Yeah.
And they both are this like similar patterns.
Yeah, it's. I don't know why any of us would have put our hands on the window there. But strange.
Well, I didn't hear anything in the night either.
Nope.
So there's 2, eh?
Yeah.
So there's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4.
You can see finger ridges like that.
But-
Mine.
Yeah.
Or what do you mean?
But yeah, it was like this.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Let's see the palms. Can you see?
Doesn't look like there's much of a smear there.
No, you can see it's definitely like that's palm prints, but
They definitely look like fingertips.
yeah.
And
Well, they
But
are.
how is
you
it?
can
How is
see.
it? Yeah. Well,
But the thumb, that doesn't line up. It's got to be pressed twice.
But it smeared its palm, whoever did it, right?
yeah, you can see like dermal ridges
yeah.
on that. So it is something did touch.
Either us or
Yeah,
And it was like that, right? Or
we can't call that any kind of conclusive evidence, but
Yes, and then like that.
why would you put your hands like that?
exactly.
Like,
Why
that's
would
just-
I ever? Like you would never push a door shut from the window. You'd always go down there, which is strange.
This is
what someone was like.
I did peer in on the other side.
Weird.
After taking the time to get our day packs ready and all the equipment we needed for a full day of exploring, we noticed something very peculiar. 2 sets of very unusual humanoid handprints on Curtis's car window. These handprints were honest to God not noticed after arriving at the expedition location the evening before. They also had clear dermal ridges that can easily be seen in these photographs. Dermal ridges are a primate characteristic, not a characteristic of a bear or any other mammal that resides in these parts. This was either from a human being and was done when we were not around or not looking, or it was in fact from a Sasquatch, maybe a small juvenile Sasquatch due to the size of the prints. This incident has always been one that I've struggled to explain, and believe it or not, many others over the years have documented the exact same thing in other Sasquatch research areas.
So this is roughly where we heard that noise last night. I mean, if you look here, there is a lot of deadfall, so trees are falling naturally, but were they falling or were they pushed over? Who knows? This right here looks like a naked human-like footprint. I don't know how it's gonna turn up on there, but this looks like a heel. It kind of narrows out here, and it looks like toes. I mean, if this is from a Bigfoot, it's the first track I've ever found. And it's a shame it's in the moss because it'd be nice to try and cast one. But it is definitely an impression.
So this is the original print that we just saw. I tried to press here, but that was where a log was, so it kind of broke in. But this is the third time I put my foot in this impression, but I stepped down and it's already popping up. It still has the same heel shape as this, but this already seems to be popping up a little more. And when we had that earlier, the toes seem to be a lot wider spread than mine. And so you can see I don't have the narrowest feet, pretty wide feet, but yeah, that's definitely longer and wider than mine. The toes, here's in mine, the toes go to about there. So that'd be at least a size 12, 13. I have a size 10, 10 and a half, 11 sometimes. So yeah, it's that's the weirdest thing I've seen so far on this trip. So we'll see what else we can see around here.
See anything else? Just the bear tracks.
Probably put it pretty high up.
This track was cast by a deer hunter near Sayward, about what we call it the North Island, Northern Vancouver Island. Did a very good job because it was a very shallow track, and so he built a dam around the outside using aluminum flashing, poured the plaster, and so we have a pretty good sense of how it hangs together. You know, basically the heel impression here, and then the forefoot impressed here. And only 4 toes registering. It's kind of interesting. The weight seems to have been on this side of the foot. And there's a toe here that didn't seem to register. And this was in drying mud, so some of the plaster ran into a crack in the mud. But nice track. Well, very good track. I mean, very clear toe definitely. We actually think this could have been the same individual as this, because it's almost identical in length and shape, and this is a little bit unique, this bulbous big toe.
That would be quite something.
Yeah, I mean, it's not 55 miles apart as the crow flies. But you know, you have to be careful suggesting that it just sounds like, oh, you're getting way ahead of yourself. And I say, okay, anyway, we'll just let that go. But similar anyway. Yeah. It's a bit of a cliche, a guy holding a plaster cast. I try to, but it's important. This is the original. It's been broken, as you can see. I've had to reinforce it, but this is the original of the one that my wife and I found. Unfortunately, a hiker stepped in this track before we got the cast in, so there was a bit of a boot print, which is unfortunate. But other than that, it's a really excellent cast. You know, shows the very stout, robust heel, toes very clear, kind of curled upwards. 15 inches, pretty close to average. I think 16 inches is the average length in John Green's files. So yeah, I mean, this is the track cast that I had on my desk since '87. It still took a few years before I said, "Come on, John, you really somebody should really be working on this." You know, biologists are usually get quite excited about discovering new mammals and be the first to really work out stuff about new mammals. And I'd go off working on assignment with the United Nations, various parts of the world. I always thought, oh, I'm going to come back and some young biologist is going to have taken on the Sasquatch and built his reputation, and it'll be, you know, done. Well, no young biologist is taking it on, and no one's taking it on. I mean, amateur investigators are, but no scientists. I think, my goodness, you know, it really is scientifically taboo. Very strange.
Are the ones behind you, those must be juveniles?
Yeah, that's right. These are from Jeff Meldrum's collection, and this is pretty interesting because I mean it's a juvenile track, just over between 7 and 8 inches in length, very, very wide, spreading toes. We have a track like this now in snow from the Coast Range here. Not 2 hours from Vancouver, possibly. Very, very nice, very similar to that, but much shorter, only 2.5 inches. So it's interesting because, you know, people say, oh, well, if you had a small Sasquatch track, it would look like a human. But no, these are actually quite different. You know, I mean, especially the spreading toes and the width in that one.
So we have what looks to be another track, and it again is human shaped. We got a heel. It kind of narrows down in the middle and then kind of widens out again. But the weird thing about this one is that you could stick all your fingers in here and kind of curl them around. It's like there's toes, I mean. And that goes in about a couple inches. This one looks longer than the last one, maybe by 1 or 2 inches. But like, if that is a person, I mean, that is a really big foot. I guess that's why they call it Bigfoot. Like, your boot doesn't even, you still got a couple inches. So we were kind of talking before and kind of figured that if something wanted to walk through here and get away without leaving prints, it could hop on these logs, walk along the logs, and maybe eventually it has to step off, and this is what we have here.
But yeah, I mean, if there are tracks, photographing, and of course including scale. People often forget to include scale, and not their fault, but sure, it's nice to have a good photograph, but just dropping $5 bill or something like that, and a credit card, something in there that of known size, so we have scale in the photograph. And then it's a real hassle, but gee, if it's a good track, actually casting it, because the casts are just so compelling. I mean, I can hold this one up here, it's just a great cast. It's from Washington State, cast by a deputy sheriff who knew he was looking at really good casts, and so he's got these beautiful arched toes, because it was a nice, and it's considered one of the best tracks ever cast. So, but I remember people say, "Oh, we don't need any more casts." Yes, we do, because there's a range, and we learn something from almost every one, and it's. I make that's kind of a joke. Hard evidence, but it is. Some people would say it's physical evidence. Correctly, it's called trace evidence. It's trace left by something, sign left, not trace in the sense of minor, but trace in that it's something left behind. But I think it's pretty helpful in trying to get a discussion going.
These footprints were definitely out of the ordinary, and it was really difficult to try and just explain them away as being from something else. Could they have been made by something else in these woods? Totally. Nature is a dynamic system. It's always changing and nothing remains the same. This track could be from days ago, and I suppose it's always possible that its appearance upon discovery could be totally different than from when it was first created. It could also be from a human being, but the odds of that seem very slim. I feel like the odds are better that there's a Sasquatch in the area, as opposed to a shoeless human with giant feet lurking around in the middle of nowhere for whatever reason. It also seems like more than just a coincidence that we heard that sound the previous night in the very same direction as where these tracks were found. Regardless of what was actually going on, it was unfortunate that the tracks were in the moss and not in the soil, making it impossible for us to make a plaster cast for later examination. While traveling through the backcountry, especially on foot, we prefer to carry firearms for bear protection. This exact area we were in is full of massive grizzly bears, and none of us wanted to risk carrying just bear spray. Because we are armed, we have the capability, if we stumble upon an unsuspecting Sasquatch, to actually collect a specimen. And to be honest, none of us wanted to be the ones to do it. The kill or not kill debate has been a hot topic since Sasquatch hit the mainstream.
What the scientists are wanting is a body. People that are studying Bigfoots and research Bigfoot, they are totally against killing one. I don't see why you would want to. They are a lot human. There's a lot of human things about them and human traits, and they must have some kind of feelings too, because they have young and they care for the young, and they grow up. It seems, they grow up as a family.
Well, when did I go to university? Back in the 60s, and in those days, one collected specimens. It was not a controversial issue at all. Ornithologists went around with a shotgun and find bird shot and collected skins and made skins, and it's just what was done. Well, then, we've gone into a different period saying, no, there's no need to collect anymore, sometimes say photographs are good enough, but then in the Sasquatch, the photograph is not good enough. Track casts are not good enough. So I'm not proposing that we collect one. There may be an accidental. I mean, obviously, my scientific colleagues would like to see a type specimen, but no one wants to advocate going out to collect one. Like we had one colleague, Grover Krantz, Washington State University, who said we need to collect one, and then we just put an end to this, and all the rest will become protected. Well, gee, he just took so much flack for that position. So, no one's going to say collect one. We kind of maybe not hope for a type specimen. We hope that if there is an accidental roadkill or something, that specimen will become available for scientific examination.
I don't know why it has to come from a scientist to, tell me that it does exist. I know it exists. And I don't know why you would have to have a body to, if we got foot samples and hair samples, like I said, and scat samples, but they're waiting for a body though. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I hope nobody shoots any.
My point is that, okay, we don't have a type specimen. You know, if there were a type specimen, we'd have a completely different type of conversation. Can we not, in the absence of a type specimen, at least discuss the evidence and the very strong possibility that the Sasquatch does exist and that it is responsible for the tracks that we're seeing and the images that are appearing on film and the descriptions and the stones that are being thrown and some of the branch twisting that we're seeing. And I'm not asking for acceptance, but I am asking for scientific scrutiny of the evidence. I think that if we could just get to that point, it would be very healthy, much healthier than I think the present situation.
So yeah, that track that we saw back there was very similar to what I had seen years ago there, with the defined heel, the bridge of the foot, as well as the shape of the toes.
Yeah.
Looks almost identical to what I had seen.
This one in particular though was just strange because it digs. You could literally like, put your fingers all the way in and curl them around. I mean,
Yeah, you can tell there's some,
if something was hoofing it, then you kind of dig in.
certainly.
It's just weird how there's only one. Unless it jumped on one of these logs, which it very well could have. The sun's gone down past the mountains now, and I actually just placed our last trail camera right in this stump here. So it's kind of facing the area where we seen some of the tracks earlier, and hopefully whatever comes down the slope in the middle of the night will get picked up by this camera.
All right, so we're gonna throw some moss around this trail cam. There's been stories of other trappers and people out trying to find Bigfoot. They put up trail cams and weird stuff happens, like they get turned around or even completely destroyed. So we'll see if this works, if he is actually out there and an intelligent being. Probably won't be fooled by this, but can't hurt.
We spent most of our time hiking through the tree-covered hills and essentially just kept our eyes and ears open in hopes of detecting something out of the ordinary or out of place. Aside from coming across the creature itself, the footprints are really what we wanted to find, and it was mostly all that was on our minds, especially after finding some good candidates for Sasquatch tracks. Because of this, our next discovery totally caught us by surprise and left us completely perplexed.
You better explain this one.
Okay, so we had like a little gopher around here, and I was
Chipmunk,
and I was feeding it banana chips for my trail mix, and yeah, he wouldn't take this last one right before the hike, so he ran off. So I placed it right here, right on this rock, and yeah, I was just sitting there a moment ago, and I looked. I was like, "Okay, that's where I put the banana chip," and now there's a mushroom there.
Like a rotten.
It's a rotten mushroom, yeah, but that's where the banana chip was. I don't know if it's anything, but that's a little
this
weird.
is like the third weird little thing that's happened at this camp. The rock, the handprint things, and this mushroom.
Like, I don't see how it could like the wind blow it up there to that exact spot,
and
you know.
And this is like, we literally just got back from our little trek in the woods. So when we were gone, something was here? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, man, I don't know.
I guess when we go on our next trek, we should leave something.
You should leave an apple there.
Yeah, we'll leave an apple, set up a camera. We should set up a camera right here. Because if stuff's happening in our camp, then I can mount it onto that sign there. Right at this area. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, man.
It is like a rotted mushroom, eh?
I've heard of clever birds that, like, if you feed them long enough, they'll start bringing you things in return. I've never heard of a squirrel naming a mushroom cap.
It was definitely like something edible or something edible.
That is bizarre. Every time we leave.
The only thing that's been through here that we saw were the horses.
Yeah.
The Sasquatch is definitely elusive, but on the other hand, every once in a while, they do blunder into the open and even into campsites, and they just stand there for minutes for people to observe them. And they seem to sense if there's a threat or not. I think they're probably elusive around hunters, less so with children and campers. And there are these reports of children almost having Sasquatches as playmates, and one doesn't want to go too far in that direction because, oh my goodness, these folks really are delusional. But one day we will kind of explore that kind of, I think it's a sense of kinship that they detect, fellow primates, and checking out to see if it's a safe place. And some of these habituation studies that have gotten to a certain point where people have maybe left food out on a regular basis, or just shown themselves to be benign people working on their land and not a threat, and they see Sasquatches from time to time.
Gifting has long been a term used to describe a human interaction with Sasquatch in which a person will leave a gift behind in the forest in hopes of building some sort of friendly relationship with the creatures, or at least to let them know that you are friendly and don't mean any harm towards them. This adds a whole nother element to the Sasquatch mystery. Do they regularly interact with people in this way? You can almost guarantee that the indigenous people of these areas would have had experiences like this regularly over the literal thousands of years that they've called this place home. Perhaps they traded with them. In nature, you'll take what you can get from wherever you can get it to survive. I really do wonder if a trade relationship existed between them, and maybe that's where this gifting behavior originated.
I kind of want to defend the Aboriginal representation of the Sasquatch, because they've really shared a lot with us. They've there's an old report, it's from a Hudson's Bay trader talking about Aboriginal people in northern Saskatchewan, saying they persuade themselves that they see its tracks in the moss or snow. Well, they don't have to persuade themselves. We do have great photographs of tracks in snow, and sometimes in moist snow, so that they're very, very sharp, as good as some of these tracks we see in mud. So, but there's been this dismissal of Aboriginal reports because there is a spiritual element, and we just fail to understand that, okay, if it's attributed with supernatural attributes, that doesn't necessarily dismiss it from also being an actual living mammal. And it's just like its presence in myth and legend doesn't mean that it's not actually real as well. I mean, there's beavers in myth and legend, and orcas and otters. Anyway.
I think that there's so much vast forest and space out there that it's easily that we've haven't discovered it. And there's tons of stuff in the ocean that they're discovering all the time. So what's so new about discovering something that a lot of people are seeing and having experiences with? I would say it's not scary. It's more beautiful than anything. But when you have an experience like that happen, you have to wonder what that is and what is there.
And I have drawings in here, of an upright bear, field guide drawings, and an upright Sasquatch. And just considering that the Sasquatch is an option, that people who see a bear walking on its hind legs for a quarter of a mile maybe should look a little more closely and make sure that it is a bear. See if it does have the prominent snout, or rather has the flat face of a Sasquatch, and check it if it has shoulders, things like that. So it's that openness which a lot of people do have, more and more. Unfortunately, I don't see my scientific colleagues in that group yet, and I wish they would show that openness and willingness to examine the evidence. But I've said that before.
Right here, we have another potential track, and I could just be imagining it, but what I kind of am visualizing is it coming to here and going around here, and it would be like the left foot coming. These would be where the toes are here. I mean, that's pretty big again. If this is the back, it's really hard to say. 13 inches, 14 inches. So something did step here. If it was a bear, who knows, you know. Could just be imagining things, but
You can see how the foot almost appears to come back to about here.
yeah.
With the big toe impression there, possibly.
It is the typical shape you'd see. It's very wide in the middle too. But what do you make that out? 13 inches, 14 inches?
I'd say roughly 13 inches.
Definitely some toes there. Okay, so if this is legit, it puts it at around 12.5 inches. And that's a decent sized foot. You can see how the toes look kind of splayed out. And that's typical of many footprints that have been found. Very broad in the middle of it as well. And that's also another feature that's well known.
Our expedition was quickly coming to an end, and I'm not gonna lie, at the start of it, based on my lack of findings at Henry Lake, I didn't expect to come across a single thing in terms of Sasquatch evidence or interactions. Obviously, the high strangeness that we experienced could probably be explained by some sort of other natural phenomena, but it truly did feel and seem like we were being observed by Sasquatch and potentially even interacting with it in an almost unknown way. I still do feel like some mysterious being was entering our camp when we'd leave or when we were sleeping, and that's unsettling to think about. For our final night, we decided to move to a different location and sleep up on a mountain ridge where we had an excellent field of view and the ability to see pretty much anything within a couple kilometers. It also just seemed like a fun, adventurous thing to do, and none of us could believe how incredibly beautiful this spot was.
Well, this pretty much marks the end of the expedition, you know, unless tonight something shows up. Look at this place. This is unreal. I don't think I've ever been anywhere more beautiful than this. I mean, mountains all around, sun setting, not a cloud in the sky. Just beautiful. When you come out to places like this, you know, you actually realize how much untouched wilderness there actually is. You know, as far as my eyes can see, there's not one cut block. It's just pristine forest. So there still are places that haven't been touched by, you know, industry, which is good. This place is one of them. I wish things could have went differently, you know. I wish we could have caught a Sasquatch on film, but it seems to be something that's very hard to do. You know, the only thing you can come across is footprints, tree breaks, and that's not enough evidence to prove that it exists, but you know, it's the best we can do for now until we come up with the technology to make searching for it a bit easier. But that could be a long time and it might never actually happen. So at least coming out here looking for Sasquatch, you know, you get outside, you can experience the beauty and the power of nature. Not too many people come out to places like this. I mean, the majority of people nowadays live in big cities. They are used to concrete and skyscrapers, and it's kind of a shame that they don't get to see places such as this. I mean, this is just unreal. I feel like I'm in a movie right now. I guess technically I actually am, but you know what I mean. This is a really, really special place.
So, in the end, we didn't prove Sasquatch to be real, but we definitely left feeling like there's probably something out there, something highly intelligent, something that was curious about us. Yes, it could have just been nothing, or it could have been our wild imaginations going crazy, but the whole experience left me wanting to learn more. It left me wanting to continue searching. The one true fact is, Nobody knows when their day of coming face to face with a Sasquatch is. The next day you venture out for a hike in the mountains could be the day that your life and your beliefs are changed forever.